Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
When Apple announced Playgrounds 4, I decided that this will be the time that I finally sit down to SwiftUI and learn how it works. Because before, I only scratched the surface of it. I haven't had a chance to use it so much, especially in production. That looked like a perfect point in time to, okay, I'm learning SwiftUI, I'm gonna do an app.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. In this episode, we're joined by Pawel, the creator of an awesome tool for developers called PlaygroundTester. PlaygroundTester is a SPM package that enables testing apps developed using Playgrounds 4 with an automatic test discovery and execution. In this episode, we chat about this new tool and his experiences with Playgrounds 4. With that said, I just want to remind everyone that you can now financially support iPad Pros in two different places. First off, patreon.com/iPadPros. Get episodes early and with embedded MP3 chapter markers by supporting the podcast at any tier. Bonus content is also available at the higher tiers. You can also now subscribe to iPad Pros in Apple Podcasts. Apple Podcasts is an all-inclusive single subscription, so you'll get all of the bonus content plus episodes early by subscribing to the show in Apple Podcasts. By default, subscriptions are monthly, but if you go into your subscription settings in the Settings app, you can switch it to a yearly plan. My thanks to everyone that currently or has in the past supported the podcast financially. This podcast is not a quick one to produce, and your support is greatly appreciated. You can also support the podcast for free simply by leaving a review in Apple Podcasts. No matter your region, it really does help. The reviews help send the right signals to Apple to show this podcast more in search, helping others discover the show. If you have a minute today, I'd really appreciate you opening up the podcast app and leaving a review. My thanks to everyone that has already done that. Without further delay, here's my interview. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Pawel. Can you first introduce yourself and kind of broadly how you use the iPad?
Hey team. Thank you for having me. Super excited to be here. My name is Pawel and I'm from Poland. I'm an iOS dev for a couple of years already, almost 9, I think. When it comes to using iPad, I'm not a pro user, so I'm probably gonna disappoint you here a little.
Yeah.
So before Playgrounds 4 was released, I used iPad mostly, as kind of a web browser or just a tool in my work that I tested applications that I were working on. But since it was released, I started playing with it a little more from a perspective of a computer, let's say, right? A very portable one at that. So I'm discovering all the hype around shortcuts and doing some research how possibly I could leverage also those possibilities to help with tools like PlaygroundTester that I released, or maybe some other things.
Excellent. And what's your current iPad setup?
So my current iPad is a 2017 10.5-inch iPad Pro, a very trusty device. Never had any issue with.
I love that model, by the way. That was like the last great home button iPad. Like, it was fantastic.
I think it's the last one that has beveled sides, right? So is it beveled or the curvy sides?
Yes, the smallest bezels ever. Like, the bezels on the tall end of those are actually thinner than the newer design, actually.
It's thicker in a small case, right? In a protective case, but definitely a super thin device. Still great battery power. I think when I'm using it for development, it easily lasts a couple of hours. Without charging. Nice form factor. I was a little jealous when the new one came out because I was a fan of the original frame of iPhone 5. The blocky, edgy one, and when iPad copied that, it looked good. But I agree that the newer devices look a little sturdier and heavier than that one.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned shortcuts. Any interesting uses you have of that so far with your iPad?
A small disappointment on my side, because I was trying to automate one thing by modifying some files in the Playgrounds 4 project, but I couldn't get that to save properly. Maybe I'm missing something there.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's the sandboxing rules of iPadOS and iOS that prevent me from doing that, from shortcuts context.
Gotcha.
Not to destroy the files, right? For someone.
Yeah, I heard there is some way of working with Playground files. I'm not exactly sure the mechanism of that. I thought you could save them externally in like working copy or something to that regard. And
yeah, for that regard, they basically get saved by default. They get saved on your iCloud drive, and you can, for example, you can obviously freely point your working copy to that, right?
Yeah,
and have Git set up there, and you can also freely share that files to, for example, a Mac.
Yeah,
and modify them on Mac and move back to iPad for further development.
Yeah. So your background as developer, can you share a bit about how you learned the code and kind of where you are today in your development work?
So I think I first started coding in high school when I was around 17 years old. It was a computer science class project in Pascal, of all languages. But I guess it was enough to get me, hooked into coding, into exploring that part. I then did some experimenting in C, C++, Java, let's say the usual candidates, right?
Yeah.
But there's nothing serious coming out of that. And eventually I ended up studying computer science at college. And during that time, a friend of mine invited me to work with him on interactive books for kids for iPad. And we used C++ and Cocos 2DX for that. That got me hooked into Apple ecosystem. Which eventually meant I moved into Objective-C and then into Swift for development. Yeah.
Excellent. So as a developer, you've worked with teams of developers where you're not the sole person. Now that Playgrounds is out, has that kind of inspired you to brainstorm what would it be to write your own app for the first time?
Yeah, I guess that's the dream, right?
Yeah.
To publish something out there that at least a few people will enjoy, right? So when Apple announced Playgrounds 4, I decided that this will be the time that I finally sit down to SwiftUI and learn how it works. Because before, I only scratched the surface of it. I haven't had a chance to use it so much, especially in production. That looked like a perfect point in time to, okay, I'm learning SwiftUI. I'm gonna do an app. I'm still juggling some ideas for that.
Yeah.
Still learning SwiftUI. Most the ideas revolve mostly around probably a video game collection or a board game collection app, or possibly both.
Okay.
Something that I personally use, because that kind of drives me it makes me know what use cases I want to have there, and something that's not too complicated, not to drag on for a lot of too much time.
Right, exactly. And the brainstorming for a new app for you, it really does come down to needs that you see yourself having that aren't necessarily filled by other apps out there.
I guess that's the easiest approach, at least from my perspective, right? If you see something that some gap that is that you could fill with a tool or an app, and you have means to do that, then it's a perfect candidate to get started. Especially since I'm not really thinking about making it my sole income, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't need to be something that is that the market needs, right? It can be a smaller niche thing.
Totally, yeah. So what has your experience been with the new Swift Playground, or just Playgrounds 4? Has it been a good environment to work in?
It's pretty good. There was a lot of chatter before even Apple announced Swift Playgrounds 4. Folks were hoping, a lot of folks were hoping, I guess, for even for Xcode on iPad, right?
Right.
Especially after they showed that iPad Pros are gonna get M1 chips, and like a week ago, we learned that iPad Air is gonna get M1 chip. So definitely the gap between the iPad and the Mac is getting thinner and thinner.
Yep.
At least hardware wise. From software perspective, there's still some parts missing. And yeah, when it comes to development, like writing code and things like that, it's not that much different on iPad than it's on Mac in Xcode. There are differences when it comes to working with that code, though, because, for example, there is no debugger in Swift Playgrounds 4, which means that when your app is running, you can't really put a breakpoint on the line of code to stop the execution and inspect what's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or even worse, when you do get a crash while testing, you don't get the full stack trace, so you cannot inspect every step that led to that crash. That's really something that is missing, something that I'd really love to see introduced as the next thing, right? For Swift Playgrounds, because it kinda is like the most important tool. The very first and most important tool in developers' toolbox is to use the debugger and inspect what the code is doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So something you've released alongside Playgrounds 4 is a tool entitled the PlaygroundTester. So where did the idea for this tool come up? What is it? And how can developers use it?
So testing is like a super important part of software development, and all modern IDEs, I guess, provide some form of testing support. This is obviously true for Xcode, but it's not the case for Playgrounds on iPad. Because you cannot even import XCTest, which is a framework that's responsible for testing support in Xcode, right?
Yeah.
And PlaygroundTester bridges that gap. It provides a set of assertion methods and automatic test discovery functionality, which uses some Objective-C runtime features, and then a dedicated view to present test results. The API is similar to how this is done in Xcode, so that everyone who already is familiar with XCTest should feel at home using PlaygroundTester. And adding tests is also as simple as there. You just add a class inheriting from test case. And if you have any non-private method starting with test, there it will be automatically discovered and run. And when it comes to how this happened, how the idea for that came, so I saw a couple of tweets and comments asking about those. Around Twitter and I guess probably Swift forums too, and on a Slack with a couple of friends. And this started lingering in the back of my head. How to do that? How would that be possible? It just I started rotating this idea in my mind, and once I checked that Objective-C runtime methods are available in Swift Playgrounds, I had a plan forming in my head for that. That runtime magic is needed for this automatic test discovery, which for me was like a very important part of this tool, because if you had to register every test method to be run, then the ergonomics of using this tool were really lost, right?
Right.
So this automatic discovery part is something that I'm a little proud of, and I think it's the key point of PlaygroundTester.
And so the actual test it's running, it's testing it's not a debugger, because that's a different problem, right?
Yeah. So when you're writing software of any kind, you want to make sure that it works and that it keeps working when it keeps evolving, right? Because that's especially true for teams where developers change, requirements change, the idea evolves, right? And the tool the app changes. So to ensure that, to make us safer and calmer, we write unit tests, which basically take a piece of code, let's say a class or a method, right? And verify some assumptions about it. Like to give you a super simple example, if you were to write a calculator app, you'd verify that the method that's responsible for adding two numbers provides the correct result, right?
Yep.
And then once you evolve that method, evolve the app. So, for example, you allow the possibility to solve complex linear equations there, right? So it's not a simple calculator anymore, but you still have all those tests that tell you, okay, you added all these new features, and all these old features you have, they still work as expected, even though you changed the code around, or even that code, right? Because you have all that set of assertions that should make you sure that what was already there is still working as expected, that you didn't accidentally break something. So PlaygroundTester allows you to write unit tests. So basically, it will execute those methods that will test whatever you want to test, right?
Yeah.
That your business logic is working properly.
Excellent. Yeah, that's very cool. And what's the early feedback been from people using this tool?
Yeah, I got a lot of support from my friends and some extra ideas, which I really liked. For example, something I'm currently also working on would be like a focus mode, because right now all the tests get discovered and run. And in this focus mode, you'd run, for example, a single test or a small subset of tests, which could help you with something that's called test-driven development, which is an approach that you write test cases first and then write the code so that it fits those test cases, so that the tests pass. So you start with a failing test and then make it pass by providing correct code, right? That's a lot of support from friends. And community-wise, I think it was also really great for someone who isn't that much active yet on tech Twitter and doesn't have a lot of followers. I still get a decent amount of traffic on the repo. And two most surprising and really unexpected things that happened was getting included in iOS Dev Weekly newsletter and getting invited here by you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's wonderful, and it's cool to see these kind of tools building on what Apple released with Playgrounds. Have you seen others in the community release tools that built on Playgrounds to make this a more advanced environment to work in?
Not that I know of, to be honest, but I wouldn't be surprised if there already was something or folks were working on something, because I think there is a lot of potential there. From things like adding support for generators and linters, like, for example, Sorcery for code generation, or SwiftLint for checking your code against a set of guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Or, for example, bridging some gaps that are still present in Playgrounds 4. One such thing, I recently learned that when you add images to your Swift Playgrounds project, they get treated as if they were in non-Retina scale. So, because when you, that's pretty bad.
Yeah, most devices are Retina these days, I would imagine, that are running iOS 15.
I also think so. I think that's true. And so when you add an image resource to an Xcode project, you can specify at what scale you added it. If it's 1x, 2x, or 3x, right?
Yeah.
Where 1x is obviously non-Retina, 2x and 3x are already Retina. And yeah, so that's not possible natively on iPad in Swift Playgrounds. You can export the project onto a Mac, open it on a Mac, adjust the assets, and if you move it back to iPad, it works properly. It will recognize those images as being at the appropriate scale. But that would be really great to be able to do that natively on device without the need to open up the Mac and just shuffle the files around.
Yeah. So with 2x and 3x, is the iPad like the requirements? Is like iPhone, does it require 3x and iPad because you're looking at further away, more of a 2x kind of necessity, or are they both the same?
So it depends. Give me a second.
Sure.
There's a great resource from Paid Code app about device resolutions. So when it comes to iPads, I think, but maybe mistaken here, that all of them are use the 2x resources, and iPhones like Pro Max and Max, you will use the 3x resources. Because this depends, on screen density and things like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So yeah, they use the resource that has best scale to look best on that screen.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you used Playgrounds now a little bit here. What's your take on, like, for a brand new novice, someone that's never really coded before? Are the Playground tutorials in there enough to get someone writing an app, or do you need to go to some kind of coding resource on the web to kind of get your start and learn how to do this?
So even before Playgrounds 4, before the possibility and the promise, to develop the entire app on iPad and push it to App Store, the Playgrounds app had a lot of tutorials, starting with like a robot game that, you just give a little robot some instructions to move forward, turn left, pick something up.
Yeah, it really makes coding fun. If coding was all that fun of just guiding robots around, I'd be a pro.
Yeah, it's so that game is more of an introduction to Swift, and basic principles of coding, like loops or if statements, things like that. And when it comes to apps, this is obviously a little more complicated, right? Because you get the entire iOS or iPadOS ecosystem and all the libraries that come with it. I saw that, I'm not sure if this was also available before Playgrounds 4, but it's definitely included in Playgrounds 4. Is another set of such tutorials that move you, through building a simple app. So definitely sounds like a great start.
Yeah.
I haven't clicked through all of them. So I cannot speak to the extent and complexity of apps that they teach, right? But yeah, it does sound like a great start to get some foundation to get you going. And then, you can start researching topics and problems when you need and encounter them.
Excellent. Yeah. I know when I was just learning how to just use the Mac alone back 2006, I couldn't figure out how to do something. So you look it up, look up a little tutorial on YouTube or something, and figure it out that way.
Yeah. No shame in doing that, especially if it's some things you use rarely.
Yeah.
It's quite easy to forget something, right? It's important to know that it's doable.
Right, yeah. So the experience of coding on an iPad, from what I've heard, it seems like it's just very fast and fluid compared to kind of the build times of Xcode and waiting for it to get over to an iPad to test. Has that been your experience? Like, what's the just experiential difference on iPad versus Mac coding?
Yeah, it does feel quicker. I guess part of it is definitely how the system works, right? So, like on iPad, the app that is in the foreground definitely gets the most processing time or the only processing time, right? While on the Mac, you get you rarely have only one app open, right?
Yeah.
One program. So that takes some time, but the other thing is probably I haven't tried building a complex project on iPad, something as big as some of the apps I've been working on previously that have hundreds, if not thousands, of source code files. Because that's like a totally different scale of the
Right.
problem, right?
Yeah.
So for the parts that I've worked on the iPad, it definitely feels way snappier, way faster, both when it comes to using the live previews and when it comes to running the app.
Gotcha. Yeah. And SwiftUI, I have heard, can take a very beefy Mac to make that something fun to work in, and that's been no issues with the iPad Pro.
Yeah, so as I said, the live previews that you get there with SwiftUI, they are really snappy because they render almost instantly. But then again, I'd say this has a lot to do with the size of the project.
Yeah.
Because one of the most common complaints around SwiftUI previews in Xcode on Mac were folks were complaining about timeouts being thrown and stating that the preview engine allowed only 30 seconds or sometimes even 5 seconds for the update to render, which in bigger code bases can be a pretty tight limit for that to work. So if you weren't able or didn't want to use some time to extract that view hierarchy to smaller parts, it definitely could take some time and a lot of resources to render them.
Yeah. Something I would love to see one day is a way to more graphically build a UI for an app. Like somehow have it translate like the Newton did or the Notes app now does of like I'm drawing this thing, have it know what that is and translate in the code that I can later clean up if I need to. I don't know if that's ever going to be a thing or if you think that's an important thing to get more people into the door.
There was something similar in Xcode. There's a tool part of Xcode called Interface Builder that allows you to let's say do that, right? So
Yeah.
you get a file with a storyboard extension, and you can drag all the view controllers and views in there, arrange them, and then just connect them to code, right?
Yeah.
There are different people like it, different people don't like it. It gets tricky working with those files in bigger teams because if you get merge requests, merge conflicts on them, it's not that straightforward to resolve them. When it comes to Swift Playgrounds, there is no such tool built in. And basically, even on Xcode, if you start a Swift UI project, right? You also don't get those default storyboard files that you'd normally do. I guess this kind of banks on the promise of those SwiftUI live previews, right? You don't need to design the app visually if the code renders so quickly that you basically just see live updates as you type the changes, right? As you change colors or setting. That being said, I wouldn't be surprised if design tools such as I don't know, Sketch or Figma already, for example, provided a feature to export design to SwiftUI code or
that'd be
something
very cool.
Resembling that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I know Figma actually just came out with Figma Fig Jam or something today. So we're talking a new iPad app. So yeah, I'd be curious if that's something they would do at some point.
Yeah.
So, as far as size classes, there's no way, as far as I can tell, in Swift Playgrounds to write just an iPhone app. And to test an app that you want for iPhone, you kind of have to put it in the smallest size class in split screen. Is that an okay solution for now? Just playing around with the split screen to get it, sort of iPhone-like?
Layout-wise, I'd say it's pretty good because the width is, I think, the same size class as on iPhones, right? The compact size class for width. When it comes to functionalities, though, if you want to release the app also on iPhones, I'd recommend strongly to test on a real device because some functionalities differ between the iPad and the iPhone. For example, multitasking is way different, right?
Yeah.
Before iOS 15, we didn't have drag and drop between apps on iPhone. So,
right.
If your app was all about that, then and you tested it only on iPad, released it also on iPhone, then you wouldn't get this. The user experience wouldn't be there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. For testing layout, for me it sounds good. For testing functionalities, get a device and test on a device.
Gotcha. And Swift Playground testing, the camera and all those kind of hardware features, they're available for you in the test. Is that right?
If you're using Swift Playgrounds 4, it's as if you were, testing from Xcode on a real device, right? So you get access to all those hardware features. Most notably, the camera you mentioned, for example, right? Because you can't get that working on Mac in iOS simulator, as far as I know. So you'd get access to that. You get access to real GPS, all the NFC features if you are using them, and whatever other sensors and features of the device you have there.
Excellent. And anything else on Swift Playgrounds 4 that you want to chat about before we start to wrap it up?
Oh man. One thing, I guess I hope that Apple does work on this app because it has potential for me. As I said, it has really great potential for newcomers to Swift and Apple ecosystem development. iPad may not be the cheapest device, but it's still a little bit cheaper than a Mac.
Yeah.
Like it could be considered like a gateway device to Apple ecosystem development. So yeah, I really, really do hope, that Apple works on that, provides, bridges the gaps that are still there with each version of Swift Playgrounds, so that one day we may reach some sort of parity between this and Xcode, or maybe one day they actually decide to kind of ditch Swift Playgrounds and just move Xcode to iPad.
Or we get Xcode 10, which is like Playgrounds and steroids, and Xcode, as we know it, is dead.
Yeah. That could also be really interesting, right?
Yeah.
The amount of features in Xcode and the fact that it supports not only Swift and Objective-C, but also some other languages to some extent, it probably would be, I don't know, a little too big to bring to iPad as a whole, right?
Yeah.
With all that legacy stuff still lingering there. But with what they started with Swift Playgrounds 4, if they build upon it, this has a real nice potential to be a great tool to start learning development, to maybe as a workshop tool for some quick code writing or some prototyping. Yeah. I'd really like to see what they do with it.
Absolutely. And yeah, hopefully every year at WWDC there's a big update, and we get more and more of those missing features. And how cool would it be if there was an external display and you could be live testing on the iPad and working on the code on the external display? That would be kind of neat. So there's a lot of stuff they could add to this thing.
Yeah, I haven't connected an external display to iPad yet.
There's not much reason
Is that supported?
to be fair. It is supported, but it just mirrors the display.
Oh, okay, just
Yeah.
mirrors. So you can't have like two desktops separately.
No. You can get you can get better ergonomics, I guess. That's about it, yeah. Because you can use the trackpad, external trackpad and keyboard to navigate around. But yeah, they haven't really done much with the display support yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, anything else you want to touch on before we wrap it up?
Not really.
Okay.
I'm already a little exhausted.
Yeah. It is very late your time, so I understand that. Yeah.
10 p.m. in Poland. Yeah.
Well, where can people follow you online and get PlaygroundTester to start using that for themselves?
Yeah, so PlaygroundTester is available publicly on GitHub. You can also find it in Swift Package Index.
Okay.
So you can get it there. As when it comes, to me, I'm on Twitter with the @Losiowaty handle. So I'm not a very active poster yet, but I do hope to get my ball rolling sometime in the near future. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been really great chatting with you and learning more about this awesome tool.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was a nice experience.
Well, that was my interview with Pawel. Make sure to check out his Twitter at LOSIOWATY. And if you're a developer, check out PlaygroundTester. My thanks to him for his time recording, and my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. If you want to support the podcast, you can check out the Patreon at patreon.com/iPadPros or subscribe to the podcast in Apple Podcasts. Apple just adds support for MP3s in the Apple Podcasts for paid subscriptions, so we will know very soon here if that means chapter markers are coming back in Apple Podcasts. My thanks to everyone that supports the Patreon and subscribes in Apple Podcasts. With that, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to everyone again real soon.